Since inception in October 2003, 97 companies have listed on the AltX, with 20 companies having transferred to the JSE Main Board after their AltX listing. For a look at the future of the JSE's AltX, we speak to Nicole Cheyne, who is spokesperson for the AltX. So, hi, Nicole.
Hi, David.
I remember when the AltX started, there were these two moribund markets, the DCM and the VCM, I think they're called, the venture
Correct.
capital market and something else.
Development.
Development capital, and they were intended to be for small companies, but they'd fallen basically into disuse. The AltX came, I remember Noel Greenhill as the driver of it, and very enthusiastic, and of course it came in at the beginning of what turned out to be a long bull run, and there was lots of optimism and lots of companies listing.
Correct, exactly that. AltX started on the 27th of October 2003, very enthusiastically. The rationale really was to help small and entrepreneurial businesses to list onto the exchange, those that couldn't qualify for the main board, and basically just give them an opportunity to grow and raise capital.
93 companies, that by any standard is a lot. If you think that the number on the total number on the stock exchange at the time was what, 400 or 500?
Correct. It started off slow. The first listing was in 2004. We have had around about 97 companies in total. What we're very pleased with is the 20 companies that have migrated to the main board, as you mentioned earlier. That was the very reason AltX was created. So for those companies that felt they were ready in the business cycle, for whatever reason, they moved onto the main board. But in saying that, we do not want to take away from those that have stayed on AltX.
What was the point of moving? Because you can invest in a company that's on the AltX, and you do have checks and balances in place. They might not be as rigorous a process, but you can trust the AltX. So why should they move?
Companies feel that they would like to be associated with their peers. They also like to be associated with the industry that they fall into. So for many of them that I've spoken to, they felt that they would like to be associated with their peers. Other companies felt it was the right time for them to swim with the bigger fish, as it were. Some companies feel that even though they qualify to move to the main board, they actually prefer to stay on AltX because they get a lot of exposure there. People know who they are. They would perhaps disappear in a big sea on the main board. So even though they qualify, they actually prefer to stay on AltX.
Now, one of the big justifications was that it's simpler, easier to get on, fewer restrictions, particularly a small company which perhaps doesn't have a whole department which governs regulation and compliance and all that kind of thing. It was to make it easier for them. Has that worked?
It has. It has worked. Companies feel more comfortable entering into the listed space on AltX, especially smaller companies. They do have to go through some rigorous processes to get onto AltX, though, just to add. They need to be provided with a designated advisor who will basically help them through the listing process. They will then present their business case to a panel on the AltX Advisory Committee meeting. Once they've been approved there, they then need to go to a director's induction program for 4 days. So it's quite rigorous. It prepares them well.
But there was a lot of common sense in it. You know, get the directors up to speed. You know, get an advisor in. Don't force them to employ someone. I remember asking Noah Greenhill at the time, why don't you do that as well for the main board? In fact, why don't you do that common sense approach for everyone?
For everyone. We have had some main board companies volunteering to come on the director's induction program because they've heard it's such an excellent program. They too have mentioned that they feel it would be a really great opportunity for people to learn, because you could even argue that there's some people that have been on boards for many years and that they're very au fait with the listing environment and with the business environment. However, things have changed a lot. And what the Directors Induction Program does is it's constantly updating itself. So when they walk away, they sometimes arrive, feeling a little annoyed perhaps.
Do I need this?
Do I really need to be here? And when they leave, they've said, wow, we really enjoyed this, we've learned a lot, and we feel that it's added such value that we actually feel that maybe main board companies should look at it.
So I think it then went through a bit of a trough into, there was a recession,
right,
and people didn't want to list.
Right.
So you've got those companies. It's nearly 10 years now. Where are you placed now for the future?
In terms of...
Well, what are you going to do with the AltX? Are you
right,
going to remarket it? Are you going to reposition it? Reinvent it, if you like?
So AltX, as you've mentioned, like any other entrepreneurial board internationally, has been experiencing the dips in listing. Main board, AltX, you'll look internationally, the listings market is really not doing as well as we'd obviously like. So we're looking forward to the turn in markets. We're obviously looking forward to the bull market returning.
Give me an example of a company that has flourished as a result of its listing on the AltX.
Well, we can focus on two types of companies. We can look at companies that have migrated to the main board, which we just, I think off the top of my head, we've had Supplement Pro, we've had Ellie's that have moved across. In themselves, started off small, capital raising was small. OneLogix actually moved from the VCM, so that's a good example there. Sorry, not OneLogix, I beg your pardon. The companies that are on main board, Ellie's and Cipla, started off small. They didn't stay on the AltX for too long. They moved quite quickly across because they just had massive growth. They didn't raise a lot of capital, thinking of Cipla in specifically a small amount of capital, but they did a lot of acquisitions and grew very fast. So for them, it was a very quick transition. It was a huge success story for them very quickly. Then we look at companies that have remained on AltX. Curo, fulfilling that private school sector, which I think is great for the country, but also very humble beginnings. I don't know if you've spoken to Dr. van der Merwe.
I remember interviewing him, yes.
Yes, he literally built the school with his own hands. And I think to give companies like that an opportunity to grow quite quickly, they have an aggressive strategy, and I can't speak on behalf of them, but I just know that the joy that they feel with where they've come from to where they are now, we'd like to think and we hope that AltX had a hand in that. And again, OneLogix, something I'd like to draw people's attention to is Ian Lawrence has worked his listing. He is at every opportunity that we provide at the JSE. He participates in our investor forums. He uses it as a profiling platform. So what we've really done is we've taken companies that people have no idea about and put them in a position where the man in the street, not only the investor, but the man in the street actually knows about these small companies.
You also have these wonderful evenings where you have 10 guys, they've each got 3 minutes.
Correct, our investor
and
forums.
Off they go, fantastic.
Correct.
We'll have to leave it there. Interesting subject, the AltX, and certainly has done well for a lot of companies. That was Nicole Cheyne. Thanks, Nicole, spokesperson for the AltX.